Okay, we're recording.
I'm just going to give people another minute because it's not quite 6 o'clock yet.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Just want to make sure we're not jumping the gun too much. All my stuff in order here. Okay, great. All right, it's 6 o'clock. I am calling the March 9th meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board to order. Our chair, Trinita Willerton, is traveling this evening. She might be able to join us later, but for the time being, I will chair the meeting. My name is Darcy Kitching, and I am vice chair. Sydney Schieffer is our technical host this evening. Sydney, would you please review the rules of the virtual meeting for us?
Yes. Okay, thank you for attending the Transportation Advisory Board meeting. To strike a balance between meaningful, transparent engagement and online security, the following rules will be applied for this meeting. This meeting has been called to conduct the business of the City of Boulder. Activities that disrupt, delay, or otherwise interfere with the meeting are prohibited. The time for speaking or asking questions will be limited to 3 minutes. No person shall speak except when recognized by the person presiding, and no person shall speak for longer than the time allotted. Each person shall register to speak at the meeting using that person's real name. Any person believed to be using a name other than the one they are commonly known by will not be permitted to speak at the meeting. No video will be permitted except for city officials, employees, and invited speakers and presenters. All others will participate by voice only. The person presiding at the meeting shall enforce these rules by muting anyone who violates any rule. The Q&A function is enabled, and it will be used for individuals to communicate with the host. It should only be used for technical online platform-related questions. Only the host and individuals designated by the host will be permitted to share their screens during this meeting.
Thank you, Sydney. The next item is approving the February minutes. We had a very concise meeting last month. Has everyone had a chance to review the brief minutes? Are there any corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion to approve?
Move
Would
to,
someone move to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, Mike. Second?
Second.
Okay, great. All in favor of passing the minutes, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, great. The motion passes. I believe we are 3-0 right now. Oh, four. Hi, Narayana. I just saw you. Okay, great. 4-0. Our next item is public comment. We welcome your comments on anything pertaining to transportation and mobility in the city of Boulder. Please use the raise hand function on your screen to be recognized and state your full name. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Sydney, do we have anyone wishing to speak this evening?
I don't see any hands raised right now. And just a reminder, if you're joining by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and you can press *6 to unmute when given permission. But no raised hands right now, Darcy.
Raised hands. Okay. Um, should we wait for a moment or should we move on? Let's move on. Okay, so we will move to our agenda item number 5, the staff presentation and tab feedback on the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, or BVCP, update. This is part of the public draft roadshow this evening. Staff is really looking forward to hearing TAB's feedback and will let us know if they want us to hold questions until the end of their presentation. Please feel free to let us know that. Blythe, would you like to introduce this agenda item?
I'd be delighted, Darcy. Thank you. I know that last year, I think the second half of the year, we got an initial presentation, and I just want to acknowledge all the work of transportation staff and planning and development reviews, planning and development services staff. I've been very impressed in my short time here that We do a super job of integrating transportation work with planning work, and I've been watching and paying close attention to the BVCP process, and I'm anxious to see the presentation and thankful for everyone who's here to give it. And I do want to remind the TAB that this will be our last opportunity, TAB members, to provide comments before the BVCP is put forward to the council for final adoption. So with that, I'll hand it over to, is it Tess or Sarah? We'll go first.
I think I'll go first. Tess is going to pull up the presentation, and Darcy, to your question, I think if it's okay and you don't mind, maybe hold your questions or write them down until after the presentation, if that works, and if we can revisit that in the middle if it doesn't. But
Sounds great. We'll go ahead and count on doing that, and we'll just wait for your presentation.
okay. So I think Tess has the first slide up. So I'll just start by saying thank you, Blythe, and good afternoon, TAB members. I'm Sarah Horn, Senior Planner on the Comprehensive Planning team, and I'm joined by Tess Shorn, one of our fabulous planners on the team, and we're in the Planning and Development Services Department. We're the Comprehensive Planning Group. So I also just have to say that I am thrilled to be sharing this with you on the second day of daylight savings when it's finally still light out at 6 p.m. So that's a good start. And we're here, as you mentioned, to share an update on where we are in the comp plan update process and give you an overview of the draft plan. So our agenda for tonight includes giving you a quick project update and sharing where we are in the process. I know there were a few of you here last time, but a few maybe have joined this time that weren't. So just to catch you up to speed. And then Tess is going to walk you through the draft comprehensive plan. We're going to talk about what's changed, what's evolved, and how it's structured. And then we're going to show you how to review the draft plan online if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that. And finally, we do, as Blythe mentioned, want your feedback on the draft before we prepare the recommended plan for adoption. So with that, we have 3 questions for you to think about. They're not the only ones that we need to talk through, but we really want you to think about them, and we'll put them back up at the end of the presentation. As we're going through, does the draft plan reflect what the community has been telling us through this process, what you've heard? Which components of the plan do members strongly support? And finally, do you have any recommended revisions, or are there any red flags that you'd like us to think about? So just to take a moment to remind everyone what the role of boards and commissions are in this process, you serve in an advisory capacity. Your role is really important. You help us identify areas of focus for policy and land use guidance for the update. You help us determine where policies might need refinement, where there might be gaps, and where there is or isn't alignment with the city's transportation and mobility goals. Your feedback also helps shape the recommended changes to the plan, as we've mentioned. And during the adoption process, you have the opportunity to provide a formal recommendation to Planning Board and City Council if you so choose, which does become part of the public record, and it helps us and it helps them with their deliberations. And then finally, just a reminder, there are 4 adopting bodies. This is a city-county plan, so our City Council and Planning Board adopt the final plan, and the County Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. Okay, now that I've laid a little bit of groundwork, where are we in the process? Well, to understand that, we're going to take a quick look back. So in October of 2024, we began with a Boulder Today. In that phase, we focused on orienting community members to the project and understanding current conditions. So we grounded that work in data collection, trends, and what we hear from the community, what everyone was experiencing at that time. From there, we moved to a Boulder Tomorrow in early 2025, and that's the time when we worked with community members to define a shared vision and identify community priorities. And so that phase was really about listening and understanding what people want Boulder to become. And then we moved to a Boulder Direction, and that's when we translated all of the work we had done previously and the vision that we came up with into policy options and a preferred direction. And we started talking with community members about trade-offs, and we also had meetings with policymakers. And it's also the phase where key choices began to take shape. And now, finally, the fourth phase, the last phase, A Bolder Future. That's where we are now, and it started in January. So we've taken all we learned from the previous phases and have prepared the draft plan that we're now asking you and community members and policymakers to review. And as Blythe mentioned, this will be the last opportunity before it's still a draft, but it's the last opportunity to make any comments before we make final refinements to take to those adopting bodies for adoption and approval, hopefully this summer. And those adoption processes will start in June. Okay, so that's a quick run through of the process. And now I'll just highlight again what the comprehensive plan is and where we envision it sitting in the grand scheme of things so we're all on the same page. So the plan really documents and sets the community's 20-year vision for the Valley, and it provides long-term direction for how we grow, how we change, and how we might invest over time. And it's intentionally broad because it guides decisions for many different city and county programs and actions across a variety of subject areas. So that's on purpose. It acts as a framework that informs development, subcommunity and department plans, and budgeting and zoning decisions. It's not extremely technical in nature, and it doesn't replace those tools. Those are the places where the policies and land use strategies in the comp plan are operationalized, and details of exactly how we work toward or reach the community vision are worked out. So in short, it's our roadmap for the long-term evolution of the Valley, and it guides decisions, future work, and community expectations. And as we mentioned when we were last with you, we're focusing on several key goals for this 50-year update. It's the 50-year update, which is kind of a big deal. So we decided to just take a fresh look at the plan, and it has a lot of great information, but there's been a lot of things that haven't been revisited over the past. So we took this time to really do that. And we want the plan to be clear and more straightforward. So we tried to limit redundancy and unnecessary complexity. We're also simplifying language to make the plan easier to read and understand for everyone, whether you're a community member, a developer, a staff, a board member, or a policymaker. And we're also want to ensure that the plan stays at that 30,000-foot level. We're setting direction and providing a policy and land use foundation, but we're not prescriptively stipulating exactly how all departments meet the plan vision. We're also working to balance aspiration and action, which sometimes can be a delicate balance. We want to inspire the community, but we also want to point to improvements that we'd like to see and progress we'd like to see made. And finally, we're making the plan more adaptable and flexible so it can respond to changing conditions over time. For example, COVID, really changed the way certain things work. And so we want the plan to be able to respond to things like that in real time, so it can stay relevant to needs, technologies, and priorities as they evolve. Okay, and finally, before Tess shares what's in the draft with you, I just want to mention that your feedback and transportation and mobility staff's feedback and input, which Blythe mentioned, have been instrumental in helping us shape the direction of the plan. And I can't stress enough how helpful transportation and mobility staff have been. They've been fantastic and really alongside us the whole way. And you also in September, we came to you and talked to you, and some key themes that you raised when we last discussed the update then included an interest in prioritizing moving people over cars, really focusing on how we move people around, not vehicles necessarily, still including them, but and supporting accessibility, equity, and affordability in our transportation planning and options, advancing the 15-minute neighborhood concept, and also looking at multimodal and micromobility options, integrating technology and innovation, but at the same time, you noted it was important to make sure that we maintain public and affordable transit options for the entire community. So we thought that was really great feedback, and also strengthening the link between land use and transportation planning. We already do a great job at just continuing to make that even stronger. So we took that feedback along with community member input and policymaker direction we've gotten along the way to prepare the draft. And it was posted on March 3rd, and it will be up for public comment until April 6th. And we hope you've had a chance to look at it on the project website. We know you're all really busy, so no worries if not, because Tess is going to walk you through it now.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everyone. My name is Tess Shorn, and I'm a city planner here at the City of Boulder with Sarah. And today I'll be walking you through some of the highlights and transportation-specific aspects of the draft comprehensive plan. We entered this project with a goal to make it the most inclusive engagement effort to date, and we had 58 engagement opportunities to date, and they were of all shapes and sizes. And from all this engagement and also our fellow departments' input, the draft plan bloomed. The feedback received from the community members helped shape the community vision for the Boulder Valley. At its heart, it's about working together to ensure everyone belongs, creating opportunities for all who live, work, or visit here, and sustaining the health of our community and environment for generations to come. This vision guides every aspect of the plan, from policies to action, and keeps us focused on what matters most to our community. We heard a lot of ideas from the community throughout this process, and here are some major ideas we're carrying forward and emphasizing in this new draft plan. There was a general desire for increased social connection as well as connection to the natural world, which was pushed forward in many policies and land use ideas. While in many ways we are reimagining the plan and updating its goals, some foundations remain as strong as ever. We continue to value a compact community surrounded by open space, protecting the lands, natural systems, and scenic vistas that make Boulder so unique. Strong neighborhoods and a sense of place remain central, giving residents a connection to their community. Climate leadership and environmental stewardship continue to guide our decisions, reinforcing our commitment to sustainability. And collaboration between city and county remains key, ensuring that our planning is coordinated and serves the broader community effectively. The draft plan has two major components, the policies and the future land use. First, I'm going to focus on the policies. And as a reminder, we were guided by these three main principles in drafting these policies. We wanted them to be clear, straightforward, and resilient. Through work with community members and other city and county departments, we were able to create a list of 102 policies, which hit all of these marks, hopefully. They focus on the what and the why, while also leaving space for other city departments and community members to figure out the how. And this helps in a world that is constantly changing, as Sarah pointed out earlier. Here are some of the transportation-related policies in the draft plan. The description of all these policies can be found within your memo. Some of these policies have carried over from our old plan, while some are new. We worked closely with the transportation team in the drafting of these policies to ensure they provide the direction and flexibility necessary to approach transportation in the city for the next 20 years. We want to especially highlight the 15-minute neighborhood policy, which came from the tremendous work done by the Boulder's first ever community assembly. They provided us at the city excellent groundwork to continue to push this idea forward into the future. And now we will move on to the land use section of the draft plan. The goals for changing our land use structure were to right size, differentiate, and create adaptability within the framework. The former land use map had 25 land use designations, and this new draft map has 4 classes and a total of 12 land use designations. We hope the new structure provides community members and decision makers clarity and expectations, while also allowing space for adaptability to unique needs of a variety of locations. Each designation has a full-page description like the one here, and they all live in that draft plan document that is up for review right now. This description says what the designation is, why it matters, and what you can expect. In the what you can expect section, there are the uses illustrated, the urban design talked about, and then finally the mobility described. I want to especially highlight the mobility section for you all. These mobility sections are meant to be descriptive and not proscriptive. They describe the qualities of mobility that are differentiating between the different land use categories. They are not meant to prescribe what types of infrastructure should or should not be allowed. The specific design needs to respond to local context. The comprehensive plan is not meant to tell us how. That comes at the project level. And then here is the draft map with the 12 classes on it. And digging a little deeper into that map, and also how land use and policies are linked to create a plan that reflects the community's vision. You can see kind of a close-up of a community hub that's surrounded by neighborhood 2, which is then surrounded by neighborhood 1. And this type of framework supports policies like the 15-minute neighborhood policy because it allows people to live near essential needs and services. And it also supports policies like vital retail bases, housing diversity and supply, as well as many more. The implementation of the plan will unfold over time. This is a 20-year plan, so change will happen gradually and will be guided by zoning and other regulatory updates, area and sub-community plans, as well as capital investments. Every city and county department has a role, and partnerships within the community are essential to making it work. The plan also connects to the citywide strategic plan to ensure that there is coordinated action. Ultimately, this plan sets the direction, and its future decisions will bring it to life. And we want to hear from you. So we're going to go into a little bit about how to provide feedback, and how the community members as well will provide feedback. So we want to make it easy for the advisory board members and the broader community to share their feedback. Online, we have provided a tool that gives us feedback on both policies and land use. These tools allow you to explore the draft plan, share your thoughts, and help shape the plan in a flexible way at your own pace whenever it's convenient. So you'd first visit this web page, which is where everything lives, and you'd scroll down to this policy review section, and you can pick from all these options and provide feedback for you all. I'm sure this Accessible Connected section might be of a special interest, but you can provide all of them. You can also provide feedback on the land use strategy with this icon here. So all of that can be found on this page. And then you can review the full draft in a PDF form by clicking this link here. And this is on our main page of our website now.
Tess,
Oh, yeah.
sorry, can you, oh, you're just in policy still. Keep going. Sorry.
Wait,
The land use, like on the web.
yeah.
You're going to go over that on the web page.
Sorry, my slides went way back. Okay. You want to review the land use
Can you
part?
just show
Yeah.
the board where like the future land use map is too, so they see.
Isn't it right here?
There's that, but scroll down
Oh,
and then
okay.
the second button. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Here's the
Mhm.
actual map. So this will be the strategy with the descriptions, and then this, you can explore the actual
Yeah. Just
map here. And you can kind of compare the future land use map that exists now and then our proposed change to the map, and click anywhere to interact, zoom in, and that's where it loads once you've zoomed in, but you can kind of look at the differences. The purple is where we've had community change requests come through, these purple dashes on this side. But yes, you can compare anything you want, look at whatever you want, find your own house if you want. And then you can provide feedback on any of this in this tab here. Is there anything else, Sarah?
No, I think that, and the planning areas map is there, which you can review. And I just, to clarify, like, as a board, we'd really appreciate your feedback now, or also I know it's just, come online and you might not have had a chance to look at it, and we'll talk with transportation staff, but even if maybe in your next meeting together, it would be, you have some feedback you'd like to share as a board with us. That would be a great way to do that. This is really for you as a community member to provide your feedback. But as a board, if there's anything tonight, we'll talk about it, and anything else that you would like to share as a board, if you could get that, somehow figure out how to get that together and give it to your staff to give to us, that would be really great. Thanks, Tess.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no. Okay, I just have a few more slides and then
Okay,
we'll
great.
return to your questions. So just the reminder about the key upcoming milestones. Sarah kind of talked about this, but on March 3rd to April 6th is the draft comment period, and you can provide the comments on that online space we just showed. March 18th, the County and Planning Commission study session. March 26th, City Council and Planning Board. Continuing into April, where we'll have on April 13th a four-body session. The final adoption process will begin on June 4th. So that's where we'll take all the feedback we receive in March and April and create the final draft plan that we'll bring to the city and county. And that includes the feedback we receive from you all. And then as a reminder, here are the questions for you to think about today. Does the draft plan reflect community input? Which components of the draft plan does the board strongly support? And does the board have recommended revisions to the draft plan? And your feedback to these questions will help us refine the plan and ensure it truly represents the community's vision. Thank you all. Would you like me to leave the questions up on a slide or stop sharing?
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and go back to those questions just so we have them top of mind. Thank you so much, Tess and Sarah. Appreciate your presentation and the comprehensiveness of this comprehensive plan. I'm going to go ahead and open it to my fellow board members for questions that relate to these three elements. Would anyone like to get the conversation started? I have some of my own as well, but you go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was just wondering what has changed in the language since we saw it in September, particularly the language that relates to transportation. There are, a few sections in the plan, some of the, numbered items, and I'm wondering if that language has changed in any appreciable way since we saw it in September.
Just to note, Michael, your sound is very low, like it was last month. So I'm just wondering if there's some troubleshooting that can happen there. But yeah,
work
go
on
ahead.
that.
That's okay.
And talk loud in the internet.
I'll start, and then Tess, if you want to weigh in. I would say that we actually, the policies are actually in their draft form. So the actual policy language. So as Tess mentioned, which you can read the plan, you can look at the draft plan in its entirety. You can also, where she showed you on the website, click on accessible and connected, and you can see all of the policies. And that language, I don't think you saw in September. So I would say that it's not as much the language hasn't changed. We hadn't drafted the full plan yet. So now it's all the things that you've told us and everyone's told us have been taken together and kind of reconciled, I would say. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's what you were asking. Maybe.
Well, let me clarify, or let me see if I'm when you say it's in draft form on the website, are you saying we can see things in red line strikeout? So
we're not yet. No,
okay.
We're not. We didn't take that same approach this time to the update because we have it's become so much shorter, and we've combined a lot of the information that were in maybe 10 policies before. I'm exaggerating, but combined those into maybe 2 or 3 now. So if you want to do a side-by-side comparison, it's not exactly apples to apples anymore, but you can always look at the previous plan and see if there's anything there that we didn't pull forward that you would like to see. We've pulled a lot of that forward. We've gotten rid of things that we have already accomplished as a city, goals that we've met, or policies that may not serve us anymore, and have kind of reconstituted things. So there will not be a red line version, Michael.
Okay. And do we, can you send us the September version or whatever version we saw last? Because I'm not sure I have that anymore.
It would be in the files, Michael. It would be in the online files.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
Okay,
just look in the files. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Other questions before we start answering these 3 questions? Other questions for the team?
Sure. Just
Go ahead.
clarification. This is a 10-year plan.
Go ahead, Tess. Go ahead.
It's updated. It has a major update every 10 years, but it's a 20-year visionary document. So like the time horizon is a 20-year, but it has a major update every 10.
Okay, any other clarifying questions before we go into some answers and some of our own questions? No? Okay. Okay, great. To answer these questions, does the draft plan reflect community input? That's for you to say, right? Because you manage the process, and we are 4 community members, but you were part of the whole process. And of course, what I witnessed of the process of the plan development, the draft development, was that it was, like you said, you had 50 some odd, engagement opportunities and lots of ways for people to engage in many different elements of the community. And so I would hope certainly that it reflects community input. I would like to kind of bring up some just points to consider that I think maybe we can, we can review the plan on our own and provide our own feedback and everything. And I think your suggestion that we put together some tab comments, like comments as a board, I think could be helpful. We could put those together in a letter for you if you'd like, because I'm sure we have some. I was also reviewing the comments of Councilmember Ryan Schuhard, who submitted some comments today that pertain specifically to transportation. And I just wanted to add a little bit onto those from my own perspective about specifically, so there's a graph on page 22 about city resident travel choice over time. I think it's extraordinarily misleading to put that particular graph in this plan, because this is the BVCP, right? This is not the city of Boulder, and people travel regionally, and we know that. And so the numbers of how people who live in the city of Boulder travel are not representative of what people experience every day, in terms of, coming into Boulder, trying to get out of Boulder at 5 p.m., that kind of stuff. So I think it's a bit misleading, especially to present those without the regional comparison as well. And those figures are on your website. You have a story map that has all the accessible and connected data that you kind of put into the plan. And there are really good comparisons of sort of city resident and non-resident. And it's particularly important to acknowledge the fact that more than 80% of people who work in Boulder don't live in Boulder. And so that kind of goes into all of the other comments I think that we would make about how transportation and land use and transportation and housing are so integrally interconnected, and how difficult it is to put together a comprehensive plan for an area like Boulder, where you have this incredible discrepancy of between people who live in the city and people who live outside of the city, and who is coming to work inside of Boulder, which is a regional job center. And I don't see a lot of discussion about that in here, although there is some on that same page as well. But I think that's a big thing that I think could go into a further, the final version of this is really acknowledgement of that regionality that the BVCP embodies, or that the Boulder Valley embodies. I think it's fascinating. So that's a revision that I would recommend. And I would also recommend bringing forward, I really appreciate how you put together the classes of areas. I'm just going to that now. The land use classes and designations. Within each of those classes, you do integrate type, buildings, mobility, equity goals, all those things, the type of design, the type of density, all of that, and mobility is integrated there. I would love to see that really brought forward, and less kind of preliminary material. There's a lot of background material that I think is a bit disconnected. It doesn't really kind of lead into that connection and that integration that you have further in the plan. And I think it's really, really important, as people are kind of reading this front to back, that they're getting, oh, this is really going to a new kind of integration of land use and transportation and all these different uses. So I think that the kind of piecemeal component of all of these, like the 100, policies up front, and then you get to the heart of, well, how's it actually going to behave? What is it actually going to feel like? I would like to see that up front, because I think that's what people are going to be most interested in and linger on. And if they don't see that right away, they're not going to understand that it's there necessarily, or they're not going to kind of dig for it. Maybe I'll stop talking there and open it up to other comments. By the way, I love the hubs. I love the different kinds of hubs that you created. I think that kind of language and that kind of structure is super, super important, especially, as we meet the terms of things like House Bill 1313, which really mandate that we're looking at more density around transit corridors. So I love the hubs language, and I want to see more of that, and I'm excited to see that. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I sent out a document today on email with some comments related to one theme that I thought should be emphasized more, which is how do we avoid creating these unsafe so-called stroads that try to be high speed and access heavy at the same time. And other Vision Zero cities, countries have adopted these functional street hierarchies. And one that's been studied a lot is in the Netherlands, where they have 3 classifications for all streets, through roads being high-speed limited access highways or regional arterials, and distributor roads being connecting one neighborhood to another inside an urban area, but having carefully planned intersections and limiting driveway and business access, and consolidating those through intersections safely. That's similar to what we're working on our core arterial network. And then the access roads, which are people-oriented, either neighborhoods or business-oriented. And I came up with 3 different places in the policies where we could add language. Policy 27 on page 19, integrated land use and transportation, which talks about neighborhoods and connections We could add maybe an additional policy right after that, explicitly mentioning a functional street hierarchy. So I have some language in my document about that. And then policy 27, page 37, 15-minute neighborhoods. You could add a sentence, streets within neighborhoods should prioritize access, safety, and local activity rather than serving as high-speed through routes. And then the third one is policy 71 on page 27, transportation safety and vision zero. We could add a sentence saying street design should reflect the intended function of the corridor so that high-speed through movement is separated from heavy access neighborhood streets. And then after I sent the document, I started looking at the mobility language in neighborhoods 1 and 2, and think there might be some language we could add with relevance in those sections as well. So I don't know what the process would be for the board to start looking at this language tonight, or we only meet once a month, so I don't know how this is going to work.
I think providing a document with our feedback is probably the best approach, Mike, and we can certainly integrate what you have sent along with, some other ideas. We can workshop that together. That would be fine, and then send it off to the staff to relay to the team. I think that's probably the right approach. But thank you for your thoughtful feedback and really looking into and through the plan. And I hear I agree with you. I'm curious if the comprehensive plan is the place to talk about street hierarchy. As they emphasized, this is sort of, well, I mean, it is that kind of level of plan about what types of things are going where, and certainly the intensity of the transportation network and the
I was wondering
speeds.
about that also.
Yeah.
I did talk with Ryan Schuhart and a member of the transportation staff, and they did think that it was appropriate, and that these kinds of policies do trickle down into the city.
Well, certainly. And this is setting up those overall uses and overall kind of not necessarily character, but the uses, the intensity of different areas of the Boulder Valley. And so that intensity goes with travel speeds and types of vehicles. Like, is this really a heavy transit corridor? Is this really a high speed auto corridor, like on Highway 36? Is this what is welcome in this area? And so, I don't know if the project team has comments on that. Do you think that the comprehensive plan is the place to talk about street hierarchy?
I can start, and then, if transportation staff has anything to add, I would say that, it's hard. It's a delicate dance. We can't include every single thing about every single top subject in the plan. All the things are important. What we can do is lay the groundwork for things like that. And I think, like, in the plan, I'll just say, like, one of our policies prioritizes people first mobility. That lays a groundwork for creating a system of street hierarchy that pays attention to people first. I would say that if we get into the weeds of street hierarchy, we have to balance there are competing priorities in a comp plan. And yes, we want to move people first. We also have to make room for freight trucks in areas that need deliveries, and we want to keep those safe. And I think there are different contexts throughout the city. So for us, doing that, while it does set a tone, it also could have the opposite effect of constraining us, where we need to think creatively in some situations where a certain area might not be exactly the same in the city. And I will stop there and see if that helps, and if staff have anything that they would like to add. Other staff, I'm staff too.
I'm happy to add a little bit. maybe three comments on, and I'm sort of toggling back and forth between the meeting and your document, Mike. But one comment is just to acknowledge, I really think the comprehensive plan is a good place to establish some of those high level integrative aspects. I fundamentally believe that transportation and land use are part and parcel. They absolutely go together. So I think establishing those strong principles, which I think the plan does, and it's always a tricky balance between principle and when you get into practice, and there's always some sort of gray line that you pass. So I respect Sarah and Tess and the team to figure out what's appropriate at what level. That's a first comment. The second comment is your reference to Dutch classifications reminds me of a past experience that I had where we were similarly very interested in the ways in which streets were classified from a not just from a typical movement standpoint, but also from a land use and a placemaking standpoint. My caution there is that we got to the point where the classification system was so ingrained in all of the work that we did and all of the things where it exists and all of our other plans, such as our transportation master plan, which will become our strategic plan, that it became really challenging for us. I'm just referencing that one past experience to try to figure out how to change that wholesale. But I do think our strategic planning process in a few years will be a great place to look at some alternative ways to functionally class. And then I think I said I had three categories, but I might have folded all three of them into those two comments. I altogether really appreciate the thoughtfulness of this and just want to emphasize how important land use and placemaking and sort of the three-dimensionality and the design of streets is important, and how these classifications that you've proposed, I think, fit in that. And I'd really be interested in certainly helping planning and development services staff and how they can, or the limits with which they have to consider in trying to figure out how to revise the plan based on these comments. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Blythe. I agree. I think that the strategic plan with the transportation components is probably the right place to identify specific, hierarchies or areas where certain types of streets are happening. Although what's interesting, I'm sorry, Michael, I do see your hand. I just wanted to make this point while it's on top of my mind. This plan really does address the quality of experience, right? This plan focuses on joyful and community-centered, accessible and connected. There's a lot of quality language here. There's a lot of values language here. And those things are part and parcel of safety, right? And so is 15-minute neighborhoods. Not a 15-minute neighborhood if you can't cross it safely, right? If you can't actually walk or bike through that area or around that area. So I think there's a lot of implied kind of hierarchies, and there's a lot of implied projects and uses and things like that. If it's possible to be a little more clear about how we value slow speeds where there are lots of people, that's something that could be clearer here, especially in the joyful and community center, because we know that to be community centered and to be a 15-minute neighborhood, it really has to be a place where people are willing to be out in that area together, out, walking and biking and doing all the things, and, creating that economic activity and vitality that requires safety, and safety requires slow speeds. And so that doesn't mean cutting off vehicles. It means slowing traffic and making sure that there's certain kinds of access for certain kinds of vehicles, right? So I think as much as possible, if we could emphasize the safety aspect and how all of these qualities that you're describing go hand in hand with safety, and safety goes hand in hand with speed reduction, and making that, how that is done will be the work of the Transportation and Mobility Department and the community But I think those things are really important to speak to in that at that kind of values level that you're using in this plan. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, Michael,
that
go
makes
ahead.
sense.
Sorry. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks.
I'm gonna lower my hand here. So the reason I was asking about the language from September is in reading through it this time, it kind of hit me the same way it did in September. And that was because, if my memory serves, and I'll admit it's not what it once was, I recall that my reaction to the draft that we saw in September was that there wasn't a whole lot in there that was actionable, and I felt that it was going to be difficult for us to know whether we had successfully pursued the plan over the time of its implementation, because the standards, such as they are that it sets, are fairly ambiguous, with some notable exceptions. Right? In answering your question number 2, strongly support the 15-minute communities and the mobility hub concept, and those are things where we might very well know whether or not we've successfully followed the plan or pursued the objectives of the plan. But there are many other areas where it's really hard for me to tell how we would know whether the plan was successful or whether it was actually followed. And so I'm really, my principal feedback, and, we can work on this in a letter, but my principal feedback would be to, at least with the transportation stuff, not define how. I understand that you want to relegate that stuff to sort of other planning documents.
Sure.
But the what, to me, is in many places still a bit vague. For example, and we can use this transportation hierarchy thing as an example. I think it's a great idea to at least, we may not need to define what those hierarchies are in this document, but we might want to direct ourselves to do that, that work. If it doesn't happen in this document, maybe it happens in another document where there's more flexibility to modify the provisions of those tiers and to create the flexibility that's needed for cargo vehicles and what have you. So that's, and I've seen Councilmember Shuhard's comments on this draft. I recall to some degree my comments on the earlier draft, and I've heard other community input. And most of it is pretty consistent on this one point, that there is a desire for more of a what in this document, that we can know what, or some, I don't know, I don't want to characterize it as actionable, because that then sounds like a how. It's more like a what. What are the goals we're aspiring to here, and can we define them in a way that's measurable, or that at least we know we're kind of hitting the target? I gave some thought to this today, and I'm not sure I have it nailed, but I wanted to spin an idea and see what the board members think of this. Because in my experience, and I think we've all seen this, that cars suppress modal competition. They kind of have a thumb on the scale because the infrastructure is designed to give them preference. And so they make things less safe, they make things less comfortable, they make travel by other modes slower. There's a lot of instances in which the automobile, the private automobile, operates to the detriment of other modes of transportation. And I think one lens that we could and maybe should use in analyzing our transportation planning decisions is whether a decision we're making either permits that thumb to stay on the balance, right? In other words, whether we are carrying forward one of the privileges of the automobile that should no longer exist, or whether we're making it worse, and maybe in some cases. I think that's what people are getting to when they're talking about, trying to move people rather than automobiles. They're kind of pointing to that privilege that the automobile really isn't that efficient as a means of transporting people. But again, it's hard for me to sort of take that broad concept and know when the plan is falling afoul of that concept. So I can pretty easily tell, and I think everybody in the transportation staff can pretty easily tell when there is some privilege that we grant to automobiles that is operating to the detriment of other modes of transportation. And I know that because you've designed around them, right? That the intersection at 30th in Colorado is a perfect example of how transportation planners realized this is unsafe for pedestrians, and it's slow for pedestrians and cyclists, right? So that's why you did the diagonal thing. So you don't have to do a two-stage turn, you can just cut right across. That's an example. The other really good, rich example of this is developing bus-only transit lanes, right? Where the private automobile is operating to the detriment of transit, and because it's taking up all the road space and making transit not competitive with the automobile. And so you recognize that and you develop a solution for it, like bus-only lanes or like transit priority. So those are examples of where this concept of what I'm calling mode equity can be applied, and you can know whether you're actually doing what your plan says, right? Are you perpetuating a privilege that the automobile has and should no longer have, or are you making it worse? So that's one. Another, I think, key principle, and this one is one that Councilmember Shuhart pointed to, is that we should always, and it should be a matter of policy, and I think, honestly, there's no good reason to not put it in this plan. Safety should always be first. I don't want to hear about trucks. I don't want to hear about, we got to get some big truck into this. Nope. Safety is first. It should always be first, and there should be no excuses for that not being first in our decisions. And too often we pay the concept of safety lip service, but we don't apply it in practice. And so that's an area where I think this document needs to be crystal clear, that is something we are as a community committed to doing, even though it's going to, unquestionably incur some hardship, right? It's not an easy thing to always put safety first, but we nonetheless should do it, and we should sort of frame what that's going to look like. So again, we know what it's, whether we're hitting the target. Anyway, I could probably go on for a long time. This isn't the place to do it. It sounds like we need to do some drafting, but the general comment is I'd like to see things that are actionable and measurable.
I will just offer that you can look at the implementation section of the plan and see if that gives you any, gives you something to go off of. And then we've talked about that a lot in terms of measurement, and to do those kinds of things justice, we haven't had enough time during this process to come up with those. So that is something that we are talking about as a next step with the citywide strategic plan, those kinds of things. So I would just offer to think about that and to know that it's, if we will keep working to try to come up with things, if we can't come up with exactly measurable items, it's because we don't want to do them a disservice and put something in, just like you said, to give it lip service. So I just add that too.
Yeah,
and thank you. Those were great comments.
Great idea. I would say, kind of like with Mike's idea, kind of at least putting it in here as an item on our to-do list, right? Mm-hmm. As a community. We are going to develop by hierarchy. We are going to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe those mm-hmm. things are in there someplace in the implementation section, but at least in the policy section, as I say, it kind of hit me the way it did in September. Anyway, I'm going to shut up and let Hernan talk.
Let me just say really quickly before, Hernan, I missed you. As a researcher, I'll just say that lack of safety is the number one reason that parents in particular choose to drive their children. So, this is really, really, really important. I think what Michael said about emphasizing that safety comes first, and safety is an outgrowth of all of these other things, particularly slow speed and, street hierarchies and things like that. All right, Ernan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we were throwing a lot of ideas around. Um, so to summarize, Mike, you think the plan should be more specific. Darcy, you felt the scope of the plan was good, right? Like you mentioned, I think, values, and community mood, maybe. Is that a good way to characterize it? Or
I think it's a values-oriented document. I think that's the
uh,
intention here, is that it's a values-oriented document that kind of hits on these high-level policies. Yeah.
I think I'm inclined to agree with you on the scope of the goals. I mean, like I'm thinking, when you write a proposal, you write the overarching goals, couple of goals, maybe one goal, and then you go into the weeds, with your objectives, and then in there you put like more specifics about how you'll reach that goal, what you will do to reach that goal. Um, I do feel the scope of this plan is good. I do agree that I think staff mentioned like that way you guys don't get over constrained. Um, as much as I like measurements and detail, I am inclined to agree that I think the scope is good right now. Um, I mean, I was thinking of some notes I took, like, because I remember having the same discussion at the environmental board a long time ago, because I think I felt the same as Mike and Michael are feeling right now. But I remember, like, I have these notes here about like the hierarchy of documents. You have the Boulder Valley. Um, Under that, you have the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. Under that, you have citywide strategic plans, CSPs. Under that, you have DSPs, department and strategic plans. In our, in that situation, the climate action plan actually was more of a DSP, like a department and strategic plan. Um, so like each level had like more details and more, it provided different content. So anyway, to make it short, I am inclined to agree with you, Darcy, that I think this is a values-oriented document. I do feel the scope is good for this document. It's a good length, right? I think 64 pages is digestible. And I do like the points that Mike, you're bringing to the table. I think we should discuss them. But I wonder if that will be more inside a citywide strategic plan or even a department strategic plan. If that will be where those kind of details belong. So anyway, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you. And then Tess, you can stop sharing. I think we've got the questions down. Yeah. Anyone else wants to say
Well,
to Sarah and Tess? Yeah.
I would, just clarify that, sure, the first edition I suggested is a pretty specific functional street hierarchy, but the second and the third are less specific, but clarifying the roles of streets in 15-minute neighborhoods and Vision Zero action plan. So it's more visionary, but a little bit specific. And on the visionary side, I really like what Council Member Schuhard suggested, that there might be a section on the transportation future of Boulder, which is not something that is its own section right now.
And I like, as I said before, I really appreciate how the team integrated mobility into each of those land use classes and types. I think that gets at a lot of, I think, what concerns us. And I could see that really illustrated more clearly in more of a network fashion to really show how does all this actually function together and where is that leading us. So I like that idea. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I generally understand the objective of keeping this high level, and I'm not counseling specifics per se when I talk about the kind of the way the document hits me. So the reason I came up with this concept of mode equity was to try to distill this into a value. It should be in my perspective, it should be a stated value of the city of Boulder that no longer will we allow private automobiles, to suppress the appetite for other modes of transportation, right? Which is what's happening now. That is, the sort of inherited world we live in. And so it should be a value statement, I think, and it is. So it's not getting into the how, right? The how is like, hey, we build bus lanes, bus only lanes. The how is a whole bunch of other stuff. But the what is we are going to sort of seek and destroy the privileges that the automobile enjoys over all of these other modes of transportation, because at least when those privileges operate to the detriment of these other modes. Because that's the situation we're in. We need to stop letting that happen. It's not necessarily privileging the other modes. It's just forcing the automobile to compete on fairer terms, which is not what has happened to date. And to me, that's the critical change in course. That really hasn't happened, at least not in any written sense. I think it's actually happening. I mean, transportation staff are doing their level best without that kind of mandate to bring that newer world into existence, but they catch a lot of flack for it because we aren't in any policy document taking a stand. I don't want it to be, I don't want that stand to be in some 80, 90, 100-page strategic document that no one reads. I would much rather take that stand now in a 60-page document that people do read and pay attention so they know what the game is. Automobiles are no longer king, and we are going to not get rid of them, right? That's the extremist view. We're not saying you can't drive automobiles, any of that crazy stuff. What we're saying is they can no longer be permitted to disadvantage other modes of transportation. That is a value change, and if that's a value we are going to pursue, we should articulate it in a values-focused plan.
Well, I think that remains to the community. When I put my chamber hat on, I hear all of the objections that arise to what you just said. And
I agree with that. I feel like that should come from the. I mean, it's a good idea. It's a worthy idea of listening, and trying to understand. But I mean, from what I understand from this plan, this is like months of community input, and if that had come up enough, I think staff would have, heard it and included somehow. So I have to believe that the data collection works, right? The system works. So if it's not in the plan, it's because that data point has not come up at all or enough. So I don't know in terms of reflecting the community input, so I wouldn't feel comfortable just putting that there in the plan.
Yeah, precisely. And I agree with you. And I think that what we're hearing, what we're seeing in this document and what the project team is hearing, is a real diversity of perspectives and experiences and values. And that they have done a great job to kind of bring those together in a vision that does take us further toward our ultimate objectives of a really people-oriented place, right? And I do think that this emphasis on safety, which everyone can agree on, can help us get further toward that that goal as well, whatever that ends up looking like. You know, I mean, we've got people, we're an aging community as well. And so there's a lot, you know, that older people, older adults, you know, there are a lot of people who really aren't comfortable traveling any other way. And we have to make sure that we're really, you know, addressing all these concerns. And, you know, you and I in our active transportation, you know, perspectives, we can really work toward that goal, right? But I do think that this plan is getting at that diversity of perspectives, and I think the values that it states are a good well-rounded presentation and perspective. Let's move on, unless there's something anybody else is dying to say about this. Thank you both. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Tess. Thank you so much. This was a really great presentation, really great discussion. I appreciate how we were able, you know, thank you for giving us space and time this evening to give some feedback, and we will come together as a board and provide some further written feedback. And, you know, we'll probably do that on our own as well. So thank you so much. Is there anything else, any closing comments or anything you'd like to say?
I would
good?
just quickly, if you can
Yeah.
do that, like we need to have that as soon as possible. So if your next
Gotcha.
meeting, or talk to staff and figure that out. And then I would say, like, maybe try to think of the top 5 things that you really want us to look at, since this is, like Blythe
Great.
said, you know, it's not fully cooked, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, starting to boil. So as much as
Exactly.
that. And thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
this has
and
been
it
great.
covers a lot of different topics. I mean, transportation is one tiny little bit, but of course, you know, we want to see transportation and land use and all these things well integrated. So, and I know that community feedback is open until April 6th.
That's right.
So we will certainly get our comments to you before then. Blythe and then Ernan.
I was going to clarify the dates, Darcy. You did it, so thank you.
No, I was just gonna say, like, so this feedback that you're talking about providing, what will it look like? It seems like we have very diverging views here, and we're equally divided in those views. So,
Well, let's
what do we agree on, I guess, because that should be, I guess, our feedback, right? Rather
yeah.
than, okay.
Yeah, I know that we can't sort of discuss offline, but we can maybe start a document. We can consult with Meredith and Valerie about that. Valerie, if there's anything you want to add about that procedurally, how we would offer our top 5 points as a board.
You know, at any time, tab members, oh, and by the way, this is, for the record, Valerie Watson, Deputy Director, Transportation and Mobility. At any time, tab members are welcome to seek guidance from the City Attorney's Office around how to work with each other outside of meetings. I think, you know, because I'm not an attorney, I can't give you that guidance here in this meeting. I think that, Darcy, you're on the right track. I have seen that there are ways for tab members to kind of get some ideas on paper and work together outside of meetings, given that the next regularly scheduled meeting of tab isn't until the second week of April.
Yeah, exactly. So let's I can talk with Blythe about that, and then we can circulate something that we'll figure it out. I'm sorry that I don't have a clearer answer right now, but I can talk to the City Attorney's Office and Blythe about that later. Does that sound okay? Just so we can move forward in our agenda? And please, you know, feel free to provide your own feedback as well. Each of us as individuals can, you know, provide as much feedback as we like. So, okay, great.
I would just add, I'm going to be traveling. I'll be in Taiwan March 16th to April 6th. So there may be
Well,
some
thank you for
challenges
giving
there.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Maybe we can kind of just consolidate a little bit of that.
And I'm sorry not to jump in, but just one more thing. Like, we have been taking notes, and we will consider the comments that you gave us tonight, you know, as much as we can. But I think like Hernan said, if there's like areas where you want to give feedback as a consolidated board, that is what we would look for, however you decide you want to give it.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, and thank you for noting our comments this evening. I think that they are illustrative of our various viewpoints and our perspective as a board. So Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate you, Sarah and Tess. Thank you for being here this evening. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone. So our next agenda item, number 6, is a staff presentation soliciting tab feedback on the Vision Zero action plan, the 2025 annual crash landscape update, and automated speed and red light running enforcement update. So staff is looking for our feedback, and they'll let us know if they want us to hold questions to the end. It seems like that probably works best. So we've got Devin Joslin this evening. Blythe, would you like to introduce this, or would you like to hand it off to Devin?
I can hand to Devin and also just acknowledge, I think this is a nice contrast and segue from the conversation about a comprehensive plan to very measurable outcomes that also are the result of a long time of really, really good work that's both comprehensive and very detailed. And I really appreciate Devin and his colleagues and all their work in putting together this update. So with that, I'll hand it over to Devin.
Thank you very much. All right, well, good evening, everyone. My name is Devin Joslin. I'm the city's principal traffic engineer, and I'm here tonight to provide an update on the 2025 crash data trends and the automated speed enforcement expansion within the city. And I'd really like to thank my teammate Veronica Sun for her work to compile and analyze the crash and automated enforcement data contained within this presentation. So after listening to tonight's presentation, you should come away with an understanding of Boulder's 2025 severe crash trends and how Boulder's long-term crash trends differ in some positive ways compared to national and statewide trends. You'll also learn how quickly Boulder has expanded the use of automated enforcement and see the data associated with that rapid expansion that occurred last year. Finally, you'll be reminded of the key Vision Zero action plan items that staff are working on this year and when you can expect another report out on severe crash trends. So I want to start by looking at some national and state fatal crash trends, and this will help give some perspective to Boulder's Vision Zero efforts and the positive progress that we've made. Unfortunately, the trends nationally and within Colorado are disturbing when compared against the progress Boulder has been fortunate to make. So I'll take you on a little time trip, but the number of deaths resulting from crashes in the US peaked in 1979 and 1990 or 1980 when there were over 51,000 fatalities in each of those years. The number of fatalities decreased steadily over the next 30 years and reached a national low of about 32,500 in 2011. However, since that time, the trend has been going in the wrong direction. In 2021, 43,230 people were killed in motor vehicle crashes, of which over 7,300 were people that were walking. This was the highest number of fatalities since 2005. Over the last decade, the number of fatal crashes has increased approximately 18%. The nationwide trends related to fatal crashes involving people and bicycling are similarly alarming. Pedestrian fatalities reached a 40-year high in 2023 with over 7,300 deaths, and pedestrian fatalities increased nearly 80% between 2009 and 2023. Bicyclist fatalities also reached a 46-year high in 2023 with over 1,100 deaths. And bicyclist fatalities increased 86% between 2010 and 2023. Unfortunately, as with the nationwide trends, Colorado has seen fatal crashes increase by about 16.5% over the last decade, reaching a high of 764 deaths statewide in 2022. The number of pedestrians killed in crashes across the state has doubled over the last decade, from 64 per year in 2015 to 127 in 2025. The number of bicyclists killed in crashes each year has remained relatively steady over the last decade at around 15 per year. I'm going to switch now to Boulder, and you'll see the good contrast that we have going on here in the city. So in Boulder, the most recent 5 years have, in general, trended below the 10-year average of 3 fatal and 48 serious injury crashes. Over the past decade, Boulder has seen a downward trend in the number of serious injury crashes per year of about 8%. Thus, while we're not yet near our Vision Zero goal, the trends are headed in the right direction, especially when you compare that against what is being experienced nationally and across our state. So a lot of these next slides are very similar to the ones shown in the memo and presented to you last fall. But we always like to break things down and just give you a better sense of understanding of the data that we are analyzing. So in terms of where the crashes are occurring by the street classification, the latest trends reaffirm what was found in the Safe Streets Boulder report in 2022. And that is that most severe crashes occur on our principal and minor arterial streets. This finding highlights the continued importance of completing projects along the core arterial network, high-risk network, and leveraging the annual pavement management program to make mobility enhancements. In terms of where the severe crashes occur, 79% of severe crashes in 2025 occurred at one of 3 locations: a signalized intersection, a one-way stop sign controlled intersection, and this is something like a driveway with a stop sign or a T intersection, or the third location was along a roadway segment between intersections. In 2025, 72% of severe crashes involved a vulnerable roadway user. People riding bicycles were involved in 37% of severe crashes, and people walking were involved in 21% of severe crashes. The most common severe crash types involved bicycle crashes, pedestrian crashes, and right angle, which are also known as broadside crashes. I know there's a lot of numbers on all these slides, and this one has quite a few as well, but I'll break it down for you. And the key takeaway here is that Boulder, again, in general, is doing very well compared to the national and statewide trends. And you might recall that in the prior memo last fall, that I also shared with you that Boulder is doing quite well when compared to other Front Range and Denver metro area cities. So within the most recent 3-year period, when we looked at what we called our top 10 areas of concern, 5 of those trends decreased by more than 5%, 4 trends remained steady, and 1 area of concern increased by more than 5%. The one area of concern that increased significantly is crashes involving people riding a motorcycle, which increased by 7%. However, again, I'm going to contrast that with the state, and the state, unfortunately, has also seen a very sharp increase in the number of fatal crashes involving motorcyclists at 30% increase statewide. One other positive that we've seen is a very large decrease in the number of severe crashes involving people speeding. That was down 13% over the most recent 3-year period. And that brought the level down to what we were seeing in 2015 to 2017, which was also close to 20% of severe crashes attributed to people speeding. Citywide, we've also seen pretty large decreases in impaired driving crashes and crashes involving younger and older people. Again, the state, unfortunately, has seen very large increases in these areas. They've seen an 11% increase in crashes involving impaired drivers, a 48% increase in pedestrians, 49% in crashes involving people aged 15 to 19%, and a 24% increase in people aged 65 and older. You're kind of getting the theme here. Crashes involving people walking, bicycling, and riding a motorcycle accounted for 70% of all severe crashes during the period from 23 to 25. And that was up from 63% for these same crashes during the period from 2018 to 2020. The biggest thing contributing to that is that increase in crashes involving motorcyclists. So I'm going to shift gears now from the crash data to the automated enforcement data. And I thought it would be good to start with a timeline just to refresh your memory on the history, the long-standing history of automated enforcement in Boulder. And really what you see here is the ordinance to allow the use of automated enforcement within the city was adopted in 1997. And the photo radar program is now in its 28th year, having started in 1998. And you can also see on this timeline how the city has added red light running cameras, starting with 4 in 1998, and then adding 2 or 3 cameras during various years to get us to the 13 total that we have in operation today. But I'll draw your attention to that right side of the timeline, the most recent few years. And what I really want to highlight here is how quickly Boulder moved to expand the use of automated speed enforcement. I'm sure many of you remember that the law to allow the expanded use of speed enforcement was signed into law in June 2023. And I was very fortunate to be there as the governor signed that bill. That was really a nice memory that I have from my career with the city, was being present when that bill was signed. But we very quickly, by December 2023, staff had identified the corridors to which automated enforcement should be expanded, and we had prepared a resolution for council, which they adopted. In June 2024, we turned on the camera at Broadway and Pine Street and activated the automated speed enforcement functionality there. Last year, we got CDOT approval in July 2025 to conduct automated speed enforcement on the state highways within the city. And we quickly worked to enable speed enforcement at the 11 other camera locations before the end of the year. Thus, while it took us over 25 years to initially deploy the 13 red light running cameras, it took us only about 6 months to enable speed on green automated enforcement at these locations. So this map, which is publicly available on the city's website, shows the designated automated corridors and the status of each. You'll see these corridors referred to as AVIS corridors. AVIS stands for Automated Vehicle Identification System. At this time, about 30% of the AVIS corridors are not active. And the primary reason for corridors being inactive is an inability for us to locate the photo radar vans in a safe space along the street, since these are arterial corridors that do not have street parking. So these next tables are very similar to the ones you saw in your memo, and they are kind of in 2 groups here. This first table shows the speed on green citation data and the fees collected for the locations that we activated very late last year, between September and December. And you can see that for the 7 corridors where we activated speed on green enforcement late last year, there were a total of nearly 8,000 citations issued and over 165,000 in fees collected. This slide shows the 6 Avis corridors where Speed on Green was activated before September 2025. These corridors had a total of over 10,000 citations issued and nearly $264,000 in fees collected. I want to share with you briefly what we're seeing as a pretty telling success story related to the Broadway and Pine Street camera that we have activated. That's the one that we've activated, have had activated since June of 2024, so about a year and a half now. So since it's been activated, we've seen a downward trend in the number of citations that are issued each day. When we first activated the camera, we were getting about 45 citations per day. And keep in mind, a motorist has to be going 10 miles per hour or more over the speed limit of 30 miles an hour in this area in order to get a citation. That number is now down to about 15 citations per day. And this represents about a 67% decrease in citations over that 1.5 year period. And we think this is corresponding to and indicates a marked change in driver behavior, which again is the primary purpose of automated speed enforcement. And for all these sites that I'm presenting tonight, we are continuing to track citation trends over time. And it'll be interesting to see how things compare at those sites over time. So I'll wrap things up here, but it's hard to believe, but we're in the home stretch of the 2023 through 2027 Vision Zero Action Plan. In some ways, it seems like it was just yesterday that we prepared that plan. But some of the key actions that we have for this year include an update to the traffic signal practices, the PICTIG implementation plan, right turn slip lane, signing and marking changes, and enhancement of green conflict markings on the high-risk network. And of course, we're remaining hopeful that the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant work will also get started this year. So moving forward, I know we've did things a little differently last year and this year, but really going forward, we expect to give you updates on the severe crash data and the automated enforcement data once a year at around this time of year. And then, of course, as is timely throughout the year, we'll also continue to report to you on the results and status of grant awards and the status of implementation of Vision Zero Action Plan items. So just in closing, again, while the trends nationally and statewide are grim, and I could just kind of feel myself like when you think of those people, those numbers as human beings, it's jarring and it's startling. But really, I'm very fortunate that our team here has been able to make progress to advance our vision goal in many areas. And I think that is something that we can be proud of, and we certainly look for your continued support of our efforts to reach that Vision Zero goal. So the one question I had was just what feedback do you have regarding the latest severe crash trends and the 2025 automated enforcement data?
Great. Thanks so much, Devin. I think you can stop. Yeah, thank you. Ernan, you've had your hand up for a while, so I'll call on you first.
Thank you. Do we go back to the Colorado plot, one of the first ones in the slideshow? I think it was slide 3 or 4.
You'd like me to pull up that Colorado slide?
I mean, we don't have to, I guess, but so I'm trying to understand that graphic. Like, what are some school of thought as to like what causes the increases? Like, do people, because even if you normalize it, I did this before the meeting, even if you normalize it by population, that number has grown. And because I thought like, oh, maybe it's just, a statistic. If it's a percentage and you divide it by population, you should get like maybe a stable number, right? But it's not actually, which I found personally interesting. So it's like, it's not an effect of just population growing and then more traffic, more cars. It's something else, right? So what are some things that could influence that? It's very peculiar data.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I will say that what I'm about to say is maybe more opinion than fact. So I think we hear and see reports sometimes related to certain human behaviors, right? There's been a lot in the news lately about excessive speeds, right? 100 miles an hour plus on certain roadways, um, which of course, in an instant, your life can change if something goes wrong at that speed or someone else's life. We've also heard, and in some ways, there's just a substance abuse crisis in the country,
Mm.
right? And certain either alcohol or drugs can certainly limit your ability to control a motor vehicle or a bicycle or any mode that you choose to take when you're impaired can contribute to a bad outcome. And then I think we've seen just again, there's impaired or distracted driving and kind of the use of cell phones. I think we're getting better about that as a society, and Colorado's certainly beefed up their laws lately related to that. But I think people still do it, right? And that's another thing where you just forget when you're in a car how much distance you travel each second, and just one glance at your phone again can result in a bad outcome. So it's kind of
So
those things come to mind to me as to why we maybe have not just gotten progress, right?
so I guess my next question, as it applies to Boulder, um, can infrastructure improvement compensate for behavioral uh, errors, behavioral like issues, right? So if people are driving intoxicated or people are looking at their phones more or they're just speeding more, those are behavioral issues, right? So can how can infrastructure tackle those behavioral problems? Because we
Yeah,
cannot control people, I guess. I mean, like,
yeah. I mean, I think one example that comes to mind is if you think of a vertically separated or protected bike lane, and maybe in particular the one on Baseline Road.
mhm.
Um, Now those tall curbs are not impenetrable, but I think they would do a reasonable job at if someone's distracted and they're drifting out of their lane at 35 or 40 miles an hour, they are not likely to clip a cyclist that's in that bicycle lane. That tall curb will have done its job and deflected the vehicle or jarred the driver from their distraction. And so in that way, I think that is an example of like a safe system design element that we are putting out there on the roadways.
Okay, okay. And my last question was the data point about 4% increase on on the arteries on the CAN roads. Um, is that like prior to the city starting all those projects for the CAN, or while it was going? Like that seems counterintuitive, I suppose. So I'm trying to understand what's going on there.
Yeah, good question. So the before period was 2018 through 2020. So that was definitely all pre-core arterial network.
Hmm.
And the period we were looking at was 2023 through 2025. So we have completed some work on Baseline Road, for example, within that time frame. Um, but obviously the arterial system's pretty vast within well, I mean, we always say it's like 7% of the street miles or whatever, and this many percentage of the crashes. Um, but I just, yeah,
Do we have corridor specific data perhaps? Because that's a very curious data point, like we've been putting so much effort and
yeah,
it doesn't make sense unless like what's happening is in the cans that haven't been completed or are in progress. If anything, that will reinforce the need for it. Otherwise, there's the data point is kind of like, I don't know, it's a little off. It's weird. I would like to understand that more, explore
Yeah,
that more.
that's a good suggestion. I don't have it at my fingertips, but we could certainly break it down by corridor and look at that.
Yeah, that would be great because I'm trying to understand that. It doesn't make sense, I suppose, to me. And I would like to make sense of it. So yeah, anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Renan. Those are great questions and a few that I had as well. And I just wanted to add on, I see your hands, Mike and Michael. I just wanted to, because it's pertinent to something that Renan was asking as well. You know, it's curious to me that in this report, in what you're presenting, the only vehicle type that's mentioned is the motorcycle. And I'm curious about what function vehicle size has in these crashes, particularly since speed and distraction are down. So what else can it be? Like, is it vehicle size? You know, it's like there's another factor here that we're not seeing called out. And I think a lot of it, might be something that you're reluctant to talk about because perhaps that's not, there's not a lot of evidence, but there very well may be. And I would like to see the police report data about the type of vehicle that was involved, because I think that that's really key here. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just to jump on that because it's also a follow-up. I'll be quick. Well, what is defined as a motorcycle? Are we talking like about a Harley Davidson or like those new, motorcycle electric things that we've been seeing on the road? Is that a motorcycle for this data set, or that's a bike? Like there's no, is like bike, does bike encompass bike and e-bikes? Like that, not clear, I guess. Because I haven't been seeing more Harley Davidson on the roads, right? So it's like, it's also kind of,
what is a motorcycle for the purposes of this report?
Yeah, and Veronica, feel free to chime in here if I misspeak on anything, but I think for the purposes of reporting, a motorcycle is anything with like a 50cc engine or equivalent and up. I believe that's the threshold is 50 cc's and up. So the e-moto e-bike discussion is certainly something that we're working on very closely with our partners at PD to get better and more accurate reporting and distinction between those call them vehicle, modes that may be involved in a crash.
Great, thank you. That's fascinating to me. I think we need more detail there. Okay, I don't remember who put up your hand first. I think it was Michael. Go ahead.
Sure. And following up on that discussion, vehicle mass and also vehicle shape has been sort of evolving, and those would be really useful to track so we know what's accounting for these sort of counterintuitive increases in various places and beneficial trends in other places. I mean, that's also worth exploring. My questions were about the speed cameras. I am wondering if there is a way to ascertain whether the progress you're seeing on reduced rates of ticketing on some of these corridors simply reflect that drivers are learning where the camera is and not changing their behavior along the length of the corridor, right? So you just slow down for the speed camera and then hit the gas once you go by. I'm wondering if that's behavior that you can detect and measure. The other thing, of course, is while I support these cameras, I think they're a wise investment for the community. They're sort of, if you're collecting gobs and gobs of money on a particular corridor, that's probably telling you that the infrastructure itself is sending drivers the wrong signal about what speed is safe on that corridor. And so I'm wondering if there's been any thought to using these ticketing rates adjusted for, say, the number of vehicles on that road as a way to ascertain where the the road is sending the wrong signal to drivers. It's safe to speed, safe to go real fast here. They're getting that message from the infrastructure, and the ticket in the mail is telling them otherwise. But I'm just wondering if there's some way to sort of capitalize on the information we're gathering here to know where we need to prioritize our efforts at reducing speeds and changing the design speed of the roadway.
So for your first question, we don't have any definitive data as far as the change in speed along the segment. The camera, of course, only gives the spot speed of the vehicles at that location. We do have a pretty, robust library of counts that we've conducted over the years. So we would have good historical counts on Broadway that we could conduct new counts and try to do a before-after comparison to see whether those reduced speeds are realized along the segment of Broadway. Relative to your second question, it's a good one. I think one challenge that comes to mind with that is that the city actually does not have the authority to set the speed limits on the state highways. So any change that we would want to make, we would need to make a request of CDOT, and CDOT has their own methodology that they use for setting speed limits. I think they've gotten better. It used to be they would put a tube out there, and if the 85th percentile speed told you to raise it, they would raise it. And it is now much more context sensitive for CDOT. So that is not the case, but of course they always caution you that if you open up a speed study, they may actually raise the speed depending on what they are seeing in terms of the results. So that's what comes to mind there. And I mean, it is something we could consider more closely. But in terms of our city's own speed limit setting framework, it does not apply to the state highways. So anything we'd find as a result of that effort, it'd be a longer process to get changes implemented.
Well, that's a good point, Devin. I mean, the fact is that there are several state highways that crisscross the city. And I think what Michael's really kind of getting at, right, Michael, is you're talking about changing the road structure. How do we actually enact Vision Zero, which has to do with, reshaping streets to accommodate the posted speed, right? Because 35 miles per hour on 28th Street, doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Because it's a really wide highway. And so, but I understand that the city doesn't have that authority, and there's a different process to go through there. And that's a really interesting conundrum also having to do with the VVCP. When we talk about street hierarchy, it's well, we don't have control over a lot of those major roads and arterials. Yeah.
Yeah, but you reminded me, Darcy, the thing that I forgot in my answer, Michael, is I was only thinking of the fixed cameras. But keeping in mind we have the photo radar vans, we review monthly the data from those photo radar vans as well. Those are mostly placed on residential streets or lower speed streets, but they can inform where people are speeding on the residential streets. I think they are a good tool for that if we're seeing repeated violations of that 20 mile an hour, maybe 25 mile an hour speed limit on some of those residential streets.
I was wondering about those vans and potentially determine as a means to determine whether people were actually reducing their speed along the corridor too, right? They slow down for the fixed speed camera, and then speed up and get caught by the mobile one and go, whoops.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is sort of a yes, but that I spoke to of
Yeah, I
it's
remember you
so
talking
difficult
about
to
it.
place the bands on the
Yep.
articles.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a few comments and then a question. What really did stand out is the data point of 71% of severe crashes occurring on arterial streets, and that really does enforce the importance of the core arterial network and improving safety. And as to Hernan's question about whether the 4% increase from 67 to 71% over the two periods makes any sense given what we've done on CAN. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that 4% is statistically significant, but also, we did approve a lot of CAN projects, but the only one really implemented is phase one of baseline, and that time period. And at the very end of last year, we got a section of 30th Street done. So most of the work still has to be done. And yeah, in terms of the green light speed cameras, I do very much support that. I think it's important to say that because speeding is such a strong predictor of crash severity. I did appreciate what Michael had to say about street design there, and also what Darcy's point about the limits of our city in shaping streets like 28th because it is a state highway. So that in that context, having green light speed enforcement is appropriate there, I think. And I do think this data serves to point out how important street design is when we have conflicts of high-speed travel and lots of turning and access movements. That's where you get these conflicts. So my question has to do with that, given at how many severe crashes occur at signalized intersections, are there specific signal design changes or intersection treatments that the staff sees as the biggest opportunities for reducing those crashes?
Yeah, good question. And I think that is something that is very much on the horizon for us to dive deeper into with the signal practices update that we intend to do this year. I will say that, signal technology has certainly advanced like everything else in the world. And the programming and certain functionalities are getting much smarter, if you will, to where there are opportunities, I think, to leverage the controller technology to, in some cases, take the decision of a driver out of the equation, or to better separate users in time within the signal cycle. So those are the kinds of things that I think we'll explore more in depth with the signal practices update and look for ways that we can apply those technologies more broadly in the city.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I had a question. I didn't see anything in your materials about where the fee revenue goes.
Good question. My understanding is it all goes into the general fund.
That's what I thought you were going to say. So my follow-up is, how do we designate the fee revenue for Vision Zero projects? How do we go about making
Yes,
that happen?
yeah. Valerie, do you want to maybe chime in here? I know we've been contemplating that as an idea.
Right, and that is not uncommon in cities across North America. I think as a body, that is exactly the kind of policy recommendation that you could, make a motion and vote on to recommend to council, especially in, kind of the next annual budget cycle. So that's one role of TAB. But yeah, that is really at the discretion of city leadership from a policy perspective.
Thank you. That's a good reminder that we can certainly do that because I think it's really important. I get that, this money is just going into the general fund, and I want to make sure that, it's actually going to the purposes that we're intending. I say that a little too strongly. What I mean is we could propose that as a policy proposal. So thank you, Valerie. Appreciate that. Does anybody have anything else for Devin? Thank you so much, Devin. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks for all the work that you're doing and for the data that you brought to us. And we really appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, now we'll move into matters from staff. Blythe, do you have anything to report? Something about the North Foothills Bikeway, I believe.
Nothing to report. It's just a reiteration of an invitation that came from the design team of the North Foothills Bikeway project, inviting TAB members individually to attend. They indicated they were very interested in hearing from TAB members. So I think you all received that invitation from Meredith, and I appreciate her sharing that at the Boulder Library in oh gosh, the date I don't have written down here.
Right, I have it here, May 19th, 4:30 to 7 p.m. in the main Boulder Library, 1001 Arapahoe Avenue, Boulder Creek Room, first floor. Yeah, so we can put that on our calendars, May 19th.
And we'll all
Thank you.
have to schedule that
Yeah.
we're not there at the same time.
Well, yes, we can't all be representing TAB at the same time. We can be there in different capacities,
We
but
just
two
can't
of us
talk.
can be there. Yeah, two of us can be there representing TAB and not talking about TAB work.
I mean, it's an open house, so
It's an open house.
just talk to other people.
Yeah, exactly. Wear different name tags. No, exactly. Okay, good. So thank you, Blythe. Is there anything else matters from staff?
Nope.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Then we can go to matters from the board. I want to apologize for my oversight at the beginning of the meeting. I didn't mention the fatality that we had on March 1st in the city of Boulder. So a CU Boulder football player, Dominic Ponder, died while driving. He crashed and was killed. And so I wanted to acknowledge that death and acknowledge that, as we have spoken about this evening, there are factors that are suspected to be part of that, circumstances surrounding that crash, including speed. We don't have all the information yet, but I just wanted to acknowledge that and express our sympathy for his teammates and family. There was another fatality of a bicyclist in Niwot, so not in Boulder, but nearby. And, every time that there is a crash of any kind, we really need to be mindful of this, as Devin said, and I appreciate what Devin said about the human lives behind these statistics and how important it is for us to acknowledge, really look at the circumstances surrounding those deaths and to provide a better environment and make those deaths less likely in the future. Are there any other comments from TAB members this evening? Nothing else?
Well, I might just say, I hope we can work on some input on BVCP in the next few weeks. It does feel feel a little bit rushed that this was supposedly our last opportunity to give input on this, and I know want to pass through planning board and city council, perhaps within the next month. Those two boards have authority to not do that. So we just have our input that we can give. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for the thoughtfulness you've put into it already.
Mhm.
Anyone else have anything to add? No. All right. We do have a couple of future agenda topics. Blythe, do you want to address those?
Happy to. Got a couple of things in the agenda planned for next month. The Matters for Staff EcoPass 35-year celebration, as well as new member oath of office and election of officers is slated for next month. And then in May, we're looking forward to a capital improvement program overview from Garrett. Thank you, Darcy.
Great. Okay.
I have to take another oath.
Re-up. You gotta re-up.
All right.
We're glad you'll be back. Yeah, so we'll take care of the things next month, and if there's nothing else, we can finish 15 minutes early. Does anyone have anything else to say? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Okay,
I second.
okay, great. All in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, excellent. Anyone opposed to adjourning the meeting? All right, so good. We voted 4-0 to adjourn at 8 p.m. And I thank you all for your participation this evening. Good night.
Aye.